probably have to get up and use the restroom real quick.
Closer.
Okay. And then what time does stuff start happening on stage?
5, we're going to eat. At 6:15, I'm going to announce the
Hey, everybody.
I'm gonna go take a. Brian, are we good to go? Can I use a break, or do you need to run into this?
No. I'm all good. You could take a break. I just verified that like right now they're doing close-up stuff, and it doesn't sound like they're gonna do anything on stage for over an hour. So I think I'm good.
Okay. Cool. Mech, it's fine. People. I put the date on there. I put the date on the graphics so people know. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Boy, we're in a motley crew.
Yeah.
We got sick people. We got people backstage before shows. We got Andrew Main. What's left?
Who knows? The end of the world, Brian. Yeah. So we're just waiting on Andrew Main, right?
Yes. Like usual. No.
Can you hear the car when I
Yes.
started it just now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to bake in here.
All right.
Yeah, Brian is now a Uber driver and podcaster.
It's true. I mean, in my heart, I was always driving Uber. I was just waiting for Uber to be invented so I could finally drive Uber.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get a quick audio check, please, Brian?
Yeah. Hey, man, this is me. This is about the level I'll talk. If it'll help, I can press mute in between saying things.
No, you're good.
Like an old walkie-talkie. CB
Yeah, Brian,
radio.
we like to hear you mostly.
Over.
Andrew?
Hi, this is Andrew, and this is me talking.
Great. Justin?
Hi, it's me, Justin. I'm talking to you. This is the sound I'll talk in.
Perfect. Give me 1 second to do this. All right. Take it away, gentlemen.
Okay.
Zoinks.
All right.
Oh, sorry. 3, 2.
Welcome to the Weird Things Podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood, who's sitting in a car right now.
I mean, you could say it's a car, but for all you know, maybe it's a helicopter. Maybe it's a helicopter that's very close to the ground right now in a parking lot. I mean, I'm not going to judge.
I like the fact you've also got a lavalier mic on, too, as well as your earbuds.
Okay, truth be told, I'm inches from walking out on stage. We just mic checked, and I'm doing the Houston Association of Magicians banquet. There's like 400 seats in there, and I'm closing the show. And so I came out, we just did sound check, and I'm ducking out. I'm like, we're good for an hour, right? And so they're doing awards and stuff, and I'm doing the Weird Things podcast.
Dedication. Joining us from Oakland, Justin Robert Young.
Hello, friends. It's me, Justin.
Justin may sound a little bit off here. I think he's, what is that? Is that Zyka? What do you got?
I think I do. I think I have the Zyka, as the kids are calling it. No, I don't know. All of a sudden, I just got this. Something just hit me, and just a lot of malaise and exhaustion and sleeping and just insane. I don't know.
You just
I don't know what it
described
is.
my life.
Yeah, a lot of dizziness. I've written 3 books about a female magician solving crimes. So thank you.
What are the side effects?
He's got Andrew Mania. It's official.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do my plug up front, folks, because I don't know how many people actually make it all the way to the end of the podcast. I'm super excited because tomorrow is the official launch of my brand new novel, Station Breaker.
Oh, congratulations! That's huge.
I'm super stoked. Station Breaker. If you listen to podcasts that like weird things, and you hear some of the things we yammer on about reusable rockets, about the future of space travel and all that, Station Breaker is set in a world very like our own. I didn't put a date. It could be next year. It could be the next couple of years. All the tech in it's real. It's about an astronaut by the name of David Dixon working for this private space company doing a routine mission to bring an astronaut up to a space station, and they have to do an emergency dock on a Russian space station. And then all hell goes to loose. Gunfights in space, got action chases on Earth. He has to steal just about anything that can move to find out what's going on and stay a step ahead of the people trying to kill him. So it's high tech adventure. I'm hesitant to call it sci-fi because it's more in the Tom Clancy sort of vein. And everything in there for listeners of our podcast, it's very familiar technology. It's not, there's no teleporters or super AI or anything like that.
Safe to say that this is the most weird things story that you've written, right?
I would say so. I think that's a very good assessment. I think that it's we like to talk about, for the most part, tech that's kind of near term, and it's just if you're we and our listeners were kind of ahead of the curve, and that we knew what was happening with SpaceX. We knew that was a big deal before everybody else did because we talk about it ad nauseum. But we understand the economics of that. We have a pretty good picture, I think, of what the world could be like, and so that's what I want to do, is sort of set a story in what the next 10 years could be like. And it's you just have the assumption that, hey, we've got reusable rockets, we're building space station, and what's it like from there? It's hard sci-fi. It's not aliens or anything like that. It's just more action espionage.
And at the same time, there's a lot of, if you enjoyed Public Enemy Zero, there are certainly echoes there. I think it's also the most Public Enemy Zero-esque type of book that you've written, which is great because it's a return to a genre that you do very, very well. And I'm sure everybody that's enjoyed that book would probably say the same. This has similar ideas, but taken in a totally different direction because of the world that it's set in. So, survival, conspiracy, action, adventure, science, it's all there.
Yeah, it's the first of a series, my Space Ops series. The second book's already written, will be coming out actually within months. Yeah, just more of a matter of, getting a polish on that. So I want to keep putting things out on the story. I'm launching it right now for this week. It'll be 99 cents. You can get the ebook for just 99 cents. Official launch is tomorrow. Anybody who's listening to it right now, if you could hold off till tomorrow to try to push, that's fine. But if you got to have it, I understand. I launched it a few days ago and I mentioned on my email list because I was trying to say, hey, anybody who's read it, if you want to put up a review, please do so. Enough people went out to go buy it, even though I wasn't trying to push it, that it put it into the top 100 techno thrillers. So,
oh, wow. Fantastic.
But that was kind of but I was trying to avoid what happened with, not there now, but that was when I did the launch. I was trying to avoid what happened when I launched Game Night, where I launched Game Night on this podcast, but it wasn't ranking on Amazon. And I sold enough copies of that in one day that it would have been in the top 10 in its category, but Amazon wasn't tracking.
Oh, no.
Because it was pre-sale, right? Or
no, it wasn't pre-sale. It's just that you can have a book goes live, let's say at midnight, or when a book goes live, it might be 24 hours after it goes live before they start counting the sales.
Oh, yeah.
Got it.
So here's the deal.
My plan was to avoid that this time, but I figure with our podcast audience, people listen throughout the week and over time, that it's fine. We're listening to this now. If it's not Sunday, not live, go buy it, please. 99 cents. And that's all I got to say. That's my plug.
But also, if you could wait till Monday, it'd be nice. Be nice.
Yeah. We're going to try to see how far we can push it. I'm going to be shameless in my promotion of it. And we'll see what it is. I'll be doing a lot of live streaming this week and answering writers' questions, things like that, talking about science. So pay attention to my Twitter.
Dude, this is so exciting. It's really, I think, what the story is one of your best, and this release, I think, is super exciting, not only for me, your friend, but also all of your fans. This is exactly what people want out of you and your talents. That not only can they go get this book and it's at a price that's super rad, but also, you know, the sequel's only months away. It's not years away, right? So
yeah, I'm already writing the third one. So
so
and
go
it's
ahead
it's
and
going to
and
keep
check it
building
out.
on the idea of what space is going to be like in the next decade or so. The first several books are just all about low Earth orbit and kind of the exciting world that is. Speaking of exciting things in space, gentlemen, I watched a
Name one thing
presentation.
that's
It came,
exciting in space.
yes, exciting in space. There was a presentation that came up on NASA 360, and it was a video presentation from a few months ago at a conference. NASA has this project for, like, they give funding to some very interesting areas of research, and this was a NASA researcher talking about his project, and it's extremely, it's a real thing, not a maybe real thing like EM drive or whatever. It's based on existing technology, and I did not realize in the last 5 years how this became much more of a reality based upon developments we've made with fiber optics, etc. And what I'm talking about is photonic propulsion, the idea of using a beam of light, particularly a laser beam, to project energy, to shoot a beam of light against something that collects it, or a mirror that reflects it off, and uses that radiative pressure. Light gives off pressure. It's very, very small kinds of pressure, but there is pressure that gives off. You've seen those little globes where they spin around, you put it in front of light. There are two kinds. There's one that does not use radiative pressure, that's actually just the little gas molecules kicking off. But there's another kind that actually can measure that pressure. When we send space probes and things out into space, we have to account for the amount of pressure the sun pushes on these objects, that the little photons striking, and how much energy they impact. But you can use a laser beam to push an object. Now, the problem is if you have a laser beam that has a small point right now, by the time that it gets thousands of miles out, that beam starts to get very wide and very inefficient, which is why, although we thought about, hey, it'd be great to be able to use lasers to push objects, you get that divergence. Well, we've developed in the last few years, we've developed what's called phased arrays, phased array antennas, phased array lasers, which allow you to control that divergence much more and to have that beam not get really wide. And so, imagine a flashlight and you're trying to use all that energy from the flashlight hitting a small object. Well, the further away the object gets, the bigger the light cone. But with phased arrays, you can narrow that cone down considerably and send it further out. So what does this mean if you have a photonic laser propulsion system where you'd have some stationary thing, maybe in orbit around Earth, projecting its energy onto an object? You can continuously put out energy onto it and keep pushing it and keep pushing it. How fast would it move something? You ready for this?
Yeah, ready.
How about a kilogram to Mars in 8 hours?
Hold on. It seems like acceleration would be problematic in that regard. How many G's is that pulling to get up to there?
Brian, we're not going to worry about how many G's right now. Well,
Okay.
Yes, really freaking fast. So maybe you want to ramp that up. But my point is when you're worried about that, that's a good problem. Because you could go slower if you want, Brian. Brian wants it slower, guys. Brian wants it slower.
I do. Well, and specific. So help me understand. This is. I know we've talked about the idea of solar sails.
Mm-hmm.
Riding the solar winds and stuff. How is this different from that? This is a case where it's receiving the energy, and what is it shooting out behind it in order to go fast?
It's effectively a solar sail, but instead of using the sun's energy, you're using a directed laser beam.
Got it. Man, that's huge.
Yeah.
And this guy has a working prototype or some kind of.
In the lab. There's been a lot of tests in the lab. They've been able to demonstrate pressure on a CubeSat. So you could send 1 kilogram to Mars in 8 hours. You could send 100 kilogram using, again, the power on this is tremendous. It's like 100 gigawatts, which is, you need a bunch of power stations to make this thing work. But you could send 100 kilogram robotic craft, so that's 200 pounds to Mars in 3 days. Okay. Now, there's a kind of spacecraft called wafer craft, which is the idea that if you put all the little sensors down on a tiny little chip wafer, we should be using those to explore further out because you can send a bunch of them out there. You could send a little wafer 30% the velocity of light.
Oh, wow, that's fast.
So you're at Alpha Centauri in a little over a decade.
So, okay, do we have to worry about, based on the nature of this firing mechanism or whatever, you're saying that distance is no object because
No,
you're not.
distance is not. There is. You start over time, you lose efficiency. But at using the conventional technology we have now, this is what we could do. Now there are other forms of this technology that talk about like recycling photons, or if you could bounce them back and forth between two mirrors, you get an order of magnitude more power. But that's problematic. We don't really know how to do that over vast distances. But just using one beam, shooting this for as long as it has, there's proposals for a photonic railroad, which would be that you would have these transmitters, these emitters stationed throughout our solar system, so that you could have a payload once it gets out of range of something else, but it's still got all that velocity. It could hit something else, could start projecting it. So there's a cool video if you do. We'll put it up on the links there, where you can watch his presentation on it, and he shows some examples of how something like this could work. Now, to make this practical, you'd have to build a power station in orbit that's like 100 times the size of the International Space Station. But
I mean, which is not from an engineering standpoint impossible, right?
Correct, and that's where we're at. It's an engineering and economics problem. It's not a science problem.
That's crazy. So
okay. So is the implied best use of this technology for intra solar system travel or headed to other stars?
You could use it for intrasolar system travel. It would be you could build what he describes as like a shuttle class spacecraft that could get to Mars in a couple weeks with this. So you have the opportunity. It opens up the solar system tremendously. It really becomes, and you have to figure out like, how do you decelerate? How do you deal with these other problems? Are you going to try to do shoot something into orbit around something else? But its implications are tremendous for both cases. And they also has applications as far as deflecting asteroids, eliminating space debris. There's many. So the principal researcher on this, his name is Philip Lubin, Philip Lubin. And it's a very interesting talk to see this, So, I mean, 30% of the speed of light, and I guess inside 10 minutes.
So this presentation,
how much of this was even on our radar coming into like an announcement like this? Like you mentioned that there has always been this idea of using a laser pointer, but this seems like a quantum leap in terms of what we could expect from something.
I think that the big technological leap has been the idea of the phased array. The phased array is using a series of antennas or emitters that actually keep a beam from diverging too much. That's been something that's been used elsewhere, and the application of that here, I think, has been kind of the big deal. The idea that you could all of a sudden say, hey, we now have the capability to we don't need ridiculous amounts of power. I mean, we're not talking planet size. I mean, 100 gigawatts is not an insignificant amount of power, but it's not, we need to convert Jupiter into whatever to do this. It's a term of power that we can relate to, that we use, that we create, every day on Earth. We create much more than that. So it's a human scale engineering problem now.
So what was the context of the presentation to begin with? Was this like looking for grant money, or this was like a show and tell of NASA?
It was a show and tell for an existing program that NASA runs, where they fund some different areas of research. So that's what it was. He is showing, here's what we've developed so far. This is the state of where we're doing. This is what we're doing next.
Wouldn't it be interesting if now that SpaceX is handling, and we've talked about this before, like we don't necessarily want or feel the need for the post office to own all of its own fleet of stuff or to manufacture its own cars. We want them to handle the general business of moving our mail around. Wouldn't it be great if NASA was able to entirely start focusing on big ideas like this, essentially becoming, a DARPA for getting our meat off of this petri dish?
100% agree. I think that we're fans of NASA. We seriously are big fans of NASA. And I had the privilege of going to JPL a week ago and seeing some awesome stuff there. You're in the room looking at a computer that's controlling the Dawn spacecraft, which is orbiting Ceres, a dwarf planet. And you think about the spacecraft's the size of a moving van, and it's out there. It's a real physical thing, really orbiting something, and that's incredible. And all the more of that we can get, versus I'm not a big fan of the SLS project, which is the big, huge, heavy lift booster they're doing, which just uses old technology and is going to be ridiculously expensive. If we could be putting more of that into things like this, oh my God! I mean, Brian, you'd be it's that's the NASA I want, not
So,
not
so
the
can we kind of peer into the crystal ball here of like SLS has tremendous inertia. I mean, this is a decades out project that that it's been in the works for decades. It'll probably be going for decades. Is there any stopping it? I mean, is there any way to pivot and say like, hey, why are we doing this? SpaceX is now offering overnight delivery to the moon. I don't
Well,
understand.
it comes from a congressional mandate. So enough Congress folk signed on to this and told NASA, you have to build this. We're giving you funding that has to go towards this. So NASA, as it should be, is beholden to Congress, which is beholden to the people. And the problem is that if, for NASA, it means thousands of jobs. That if they said no to this, it's not like they get to use the money for something else. And so they're in a quandary where if they say no, 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 we'd rather not commit to this. We'd rather not commit $1 billion to this because 5 years from now that billion might buy us a lot on a Blue Origin flight or something else. It's just not a practical reality. So I don't know what the short term answer is. I think that as other private space companies come up with competing technologies, if SpaceX makes a Falcon Heavy, if SpaceX makes their MCT or their really, really big heavy lift in a shorter time frame, then yeah, it becomes a viable thing. Then you're going to have people going to Congress and saying, much with the Air Force, why are you going to these guys? Why are we doing this when we can go do it cheaper? That's when it happens. But, it's SpaceX, everybody else. Like SpaceX has a Falcon 9. That's all they've got. I mean, it's amazing, but they don't have the Falcon Heavy hasn't launched yet, has not taken off. And we all think that it will. We're all high hopes for it. But until it is a reality.
So what's great about this presentation is it just is a stark reminder that whatever it is, for as much as we are into the new private space race, it just shows that the most significant technology in space travel 10 years from now will be one that's not even on our radar right now. I mean, or barely on our radar. It's gonna be something like this that's in some skunk works and is just gonna show up and revolutionize everything.
Yeah, and there's plenty of fringe stuff too, which may pan out or not. But even without going to that stuff, the crazy nutty stuff like the EM drive or whatever, this is a real thing. This is known physics, and that's what's exciting is the idea that you start thinking about literally putting a 2-pound probe on Mars in 8 hours. That you could have a 200-pound spacecraft on there in 3 days. What does that mean? It just
I mean it's absolutely crazy, and ultimately what's almost more exciting in the here and now is that these ideas catch momentum, that we are so focused on it because these aren't just vaporware in ways that they used to be. These are things that like, oh wow, no, hey, look, why can't this happen?
Precisely. A lot of interesting technologies out there. I've talked a bit more about fusion. I'm a believer that we're probably going to have a radically big development in fusion very, very shortly. And we talk about how it's always been 20 years away, but it's always been one big government project doing it.
Yeah.
So do you have a specific technology that's on the fringe right now that you feel like makes you bullish on fusion?
Yeah, I mean, well, what's happened in fusion in the last 5 or 6 years is there are the number of companies and people trying to make it happen has just increased dramatically. It used to be there was the Department of Energy said that, hey, fusion is our baby. We're building our tokamak reactor. If any fusion project went for funding in the United States government that got above some little experimental test thing, they would say, no, you can't do that. It's ours. So you've had one monolithic organization in the United States that's been running it and saying that we're betting on this tokamak thing, that even once it gets up and running, it's not a thing you can drop into a power plant. And that's been problematic. And there's been a brain drain. There's not, there haven't been anybody outside of, basement labs and small workshops working on the problem. We've seen before how, like with the Human Genome Project, how this was a project that at the onset, we could say, hey, this will be a great thing. Inside there were people like Craig Venter who are like, hey, we've got a faster way. But they're like, well, no, this is the way we're going to do it. And he stepped outside into the world of private capital. And that was a position where 10 years before, there wasn't private capital to support an effort like that. Now, within fusion research, you've got a number of companies. You've got General Fusion, Tri-Alpha Energy, EM. You've got a few different companies out there that are doing this with really brilliant people trying different strategies. And what they're trying to do is, versus the National Ignition Facility, ITAR, and these other big, huge projects, they're all building these round tokamak reactors or fusion reactors that are experimental, and once they work and once maybe they achieve successful ignition, they then have to build some other thing to figure out how to scale it to work into our existing power system. What these companies are doing is they have different ways of doing this stuff, different strategies of different designs. They're not doing the toroidal, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I know, they're using other designs for this. Their goal is, we've achieved small laboratory success. Now we're building these bigger modules. And once these things are done, once our reactor's done, we can drop it into an existing power plant that uses steam driven, and it will power those turbines. They're building something that's ready to scale in 10 years' time, not 30.
Wow.
Internally, I hear, a lot of this is very stealth. A lot of this is very under the radar, where people are kind of keeping secret. Internally, I hear we're 3 years away from something happening. That could be, but that could be BS. Let's tell investors this sort of thing. But there's more capital, more intellectual capital has been spent on this project now in the last 5 years than has been spent, outside of government in the last 50.
Yeah, I hope it's the kind of thing where it really is just a engineering issue where all you need to do is like you say, put the right amount of human capital towards it. I hope I don't see any reason that it would be a fundamental issue. It's not like we're hoping to figure out a way to make sand into a energy source or something.
Right. No, yeah, it's you get into, there's a lot of little hard problems you have to solve, and putting that much energy into something, not having your coils blow apart or what have you. Now, Bryce has just pulled up Lockheed is working on their thing, their compact reactor system. They have their own project to develop a fusion reactor. And again, the idea of doing this compact fusion system is that you can then drop them into place into existing power grids, which means, let's say tomorrow somebody comes out and says, yes, we've successfully done this. It puts out more energy than it takes in. They can then, I'll tell you the problem with the Lockheed problem in reactor though in a second. But the problem that what you then have is, you could say that realistically we're 10 years out from you plugging something into the wall and having to be powered by fusion, and that changes everything. Your costs, your fuel costs are 1,000% less, 1,000th rather of what conventional fuels cost. The best, most interesting efforts in fusion, I believe, are what's called the PB11 fusion reactors, where conventional fusion is taking isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium, and fusing those together. But they have a high neutronticity, which means they give off a lot of neutrons when they do that, which means you have to have tons of shielding. Where PB11 uses a proton, and then it uses a isotope of boron, which makes up 1/3 of all boron atoms. And that has an extremely low level of neutronicity, which means that you could put this into existing power plants and not worrying about making, the radiation it gives off as it's running. So PB11 is a very exciting area of research. This is what Robert Bussard was working on, who was the inventor of the Bussard ramjet, who was a big work for head of Los Alamos, is a pioneering researcher in atomic energy, who spent the last year of his life working on fusion. He sadly died in 2007, but he'd been, making some very interesting developments up until he passed away.
Holy cow. Dude, that's the sound of me in over my head at this point. I got nothing in the way of fusion.
Watch Robert Bussard's talk for Google. Robert Bussard, Bussard, Google Talk, and he does a really good overview of state of fusion, why he thinks tokamak reactors are not the way to go. And he was a guy who was an early developer of that. And he made this talk about a year before he passed away. He was reached this point where he had a naval contract with his company, and they reached the end of the naval contract. And the problem they had is that they wanted more funding. The DOE would say, no, this is our purview. And not to disrespect the DOE, but that it gets into the sort of the the way in which government sort of can work, where it just carves out territory and says, we do this, you don't do this. Our best minds have said this is the way it works, and that doesn't capitalize on the wisdom of the crowds. So.
Yeah, man, dude, that is astonishing. I wish I had more to offer, but I am out of my depth. But I'll tell you who's not out of their depth is how many Bryce, how many folks are we up to on the Patreon now?
We are at 436 beautiful patrons.
436 people keeping our program as regular as if you are our very own Metamucil. We cannot thank you guys enough. You guys, in fact, right now, this is exactly the kind of situation where normally, back in the old days, the dark ages, I would have said like, hey guys, I got this show. I can't do the Weird Things podcast. And yet here we are right now inside the Scamcopter 5000 chatting with you guys about nuclear fusion and sending things to Mars in 8 hours. It's freaking insane.
Very insane. You know what else is insane?
What? Goblins?
I don't have a goblin story, but I think this is kind of more scarier than a goblin. Several people sent this to us, and understandably so. Hey, you know what's fun? Do you guys like monkeys?
Yeah, are you kidding? We all love monkeys. Who doesn't love monkeys?
Justin, do you like monkeys?
Yes,
I love monkeys.
He just sign language to me, saying that he loves monkeys.
Do you know it'd be fun? Like, what if we like gave a monkey like some rum to drink? That'd be kind of fun, right?
Wait, are you talking about drunk monkeys? Are we getting into drunk monkey talk?
Maybe we're getting a drunk monkey. So let's give a little monkey some rum, right? Monkeys would drink. Like, I mean, what's the legal age of drinking for a monkey, right?
Okay, now help me out here. If I remember correctly, the studies I've seen, now these are rats, not monkeys, but like rats who are given the option of drinking ethanol, oftentimes they don't like it at all. They don't do anything to it. They taste it once, they leave it alone, unless those rats are subjected to long-term stress, in which case then they start hitting the sauce. I assume it's the same with monkeys, question mark?
So we've had some mixed stories here where we talked about, let's say, these apes, these gorillas we thought were eating berries that had fermented and were punching photographers and stuff. And then we've heard like, no, that's not true. That's a lie spread by, the lobby of monkeys who have, apes with no tails versus monkeys. So we have now here an example of what we think is alcohol-induced monkey behavior. A monkey in Brazil was at a bar, was given some rum, and your buddy from high school who has a little bit too much, this monkey.
Oh, wait a minute. I've totally read about this story.
Monkey couldn't hold it. I just sent Bryce some video of this, and it's one of those things you read about it, and then you see this, and care to describe what you see here?
Okay. I did not see this video, but we're looking at some kind of bodega. There's a monkey on top of the roof brandishing a gigantic chef's knife. This thing is like the size of a lightsaber in its hand, and it's got it in perfect psycho stabby position, and it's poking this thing. Oh, it's so much better with video. This is amazing.
This is a giant knife. This monkey is brandishing on the roof. It's like one of those photos of, when somebody the police do a stop and they got the crazy person standing on top of a newspaper stand or a garbage can, like, don't come close. This monkey's having a bad one, but he's just not letting go of that knife.
And he's definitely he's not making stabbing motions, but he's definitely holding it that ready to jab an eye out if the need arises, going back and forth. Okay, so what did the monkey get into?
The story is the monkey got into some rum.
How much rum? How much rum does it take for a monkey to suddenly? I mean, first of all, monkeys, I assume, have a pretty good sense of what a knife is, right?
They're tool users. They use termite sticks and, or sticks get termites and stuff. I mean, chimps do. And I think that they have some understanding of that. I had a friend whose dad was in Vietnam, and they looked, and they're sitting in the building there, and they see this hallway, and they look out there and they see this monkey walking towards them, and they're like, oh, look, there's the monkey, and they see the monkey's got a grenade in its hand.
Oh my God! Hey, wait, so did where? What happened next?
I think the monkey didn't pull the pin, so that did happen. But you don't want to see anybody with a grenade, much less a monkey. So
Yeah. Man, now all of a sudden I'm thinking about the ethical implications. I mean, beyond the ethical implications of war, what about the ethical implications of involuntary conscription of animals? Like, I know that to clear minefields, sometimes they'll just run 100 sheep across a field and just watch as
where mutton comes
stop
from
and start detonating all over the place.
Oh, yeah. I think that there was funny when they were doing the lead up to the new Planet of the Apes movies. I think they made some viral video of like of a chimpanzee holding a gun and shooting people with a gun.
Yeah, that's right. Like laughing as it fired an AK-47 or something.
Yeah, and I had somebody who showed this to me, like, "Oh, did you see this thing?" And he's monk, and I didn't know that it was a viral campaign, but he shows this to me. I'm like, I don't believe it. Like, no, it's real. Check it out. I'm like, this has got to be like some viral campaign for something. It's like, no, it's not. And then you look up, and it's from Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Well, there's similarly recently I saw on the Google News. Yeah, by the way, we're looking at it right now. It's footage of them mocking a chimpanzee, and then the chimpanzee grabs the gun and starts firing. Similarly, there was alleged sniper footage of somebody. You hear what sounds like appropriate language for the region. You see what looks like somebody just bullseyeing a bunch of black figures against a heat infrared screen. And it turns out after the fact that it was just a crude video of somebody playing Call of Duty from 3 years ago. Yeah.
I think it was like the Iranian said that was their, the Hamas target shooters or whatever, taking out ISIS or something like that. It was
correct.
Their news agency reported that as legit.
Well, it's funny because it used to be so it used to be in the 1800s that nobody really believed, and this is all, I don't know, this is what I'm told. Don't believe me. I don't know nothing. But in the 1800s, there was more credibility given to a eyewitness account than there was any kind of graphical depiction, whether it be a photograph or whatever. Then you get to the 20th century when all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you could say whatever you want. I want to see the pictures. But then, we had lots of fake UFO photos. We had the very famous photo of the dude with the giant, like chicken or dachshund size grasshoppers. Did you ever see that hoax?
No.
Yeah, I'm sure Bryce can find it on there. But there was a brief period where, this isn't the photo I'm thinking of, but it's stuff like this, where seeing was believing. And now we've entered, there we go, the second image right there. If you click on it, Bryce, that's the one I'm thinking of. We're entering this post-visual world where all of a sudden we can't trust our own eyes, or now all of a sudden the determinant of whether or not we think something's real or not is, hey man, is somebody making a buck on this? I'm only going to believe it if not.
And I wouldn't even use that. I think there's so many people who just do it for the lulz and we've had the history of, we've been faking photographs since photography was invented, and faked photographs have found their ways in the newspaper. There's numerous examples with the Spanish-American Wars. Was that used to incite us into battle? Staged photographs, that's one of the problematic things. Is there's certain, we'll say, regimes in other countries that are very good at getting sympathy, and one of the things in which they do it is by, well, we'll put a teddy bear in the site of an explosion, and people will cry, and people will think that a child died, but there was nobody there.
Well, and in fact, you see some of those. For example, the iconic photos of children, naked children, running down the streets of Vietnam. That's not a case where it's so much faked, so much as artfully cropped after the fact, because it's a little bit, when you look at that image, it is a gut punch to the horrors of war, but it has something taken away from it when you see the original photo as it was originally framed, where you see, American GIs, other war photographers casually changing their film next to it. It's amazing how much of I don't know. I don't know. It's I don't know where the ethical lines are and where things start to become manufactured and fake versus just artistically managed.
That's a very good, it's a good question, because you get at any point where you choose to aim the lens in itself is a choice. You're absolutely making a choice to that. And we see numerous examples and counterexamples of that, of, oh, here's the empty seats at this political rally. Well, that was, you know, 2 hours before they let people in. Or yes, but this was a rally that was originally scheduled for 500 people and 5,000 people showed up, so they had to move it to a different auditorium. And it's yeah. I don't believe anything anybody ever says. Anything at all. Even
Especially us. No, don't believe anything. So okay, so what is the gold standard of evidence nowadays? Because if we live in a Photoshop world where all evidence can be faked and curated and cropped, and now we see astroturfing on social media. What is the gold standard for believability?
I don't know. You want to have enough. I think it's the same as it always has been. Is that one? I'm a believer that you provisionally can accept things. You never want to say, well, this is 100% true, because that's the roadmap to deluding yourself. Is once you believe that reality is real. Our understanding of it can be imperfect, and when you think that you have a perfect understanding of an imperfect reality, then you're going to lead yourself into some very weird places. For me, it has to do a lot with, like, what are our first person sources? What's the credibility for that? And as far as images and video, you want to see multiple sources of that, but you're never going to have 100%. You're never going to have 100%.
Sure, but nowadays I think the biggest thing is if an event happens, we instantly expect to see multiple angles from many different people at the same time. Whereas, ever since in a post 9/11 world, we just expect that there's got to be cameras running at all angles, if it's something important.
I agree, but I think that's the next step for hoaxing. I think the next step is the next big hoax we're going to see is going to be like, hey, remember when the Russian meteorite blew up? Okay,
sure.
And we had all of these, there was handfuls of examples, and it was such an incredible thing. There was a lot of skepticism at first. Like, is this a real thing? Is this some sort of viral thing? And it's happened with, like, I don't know if it was Battle LA or Skyline or one of those other movies, these alien invasion movies, or, where they, like, 5 different things get uploaded at once saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, which creates this idea of, hey, look what's going on. When they had the recent Trident missile test off the coast of California, you had a lot of different people making accounts for it, but before you saw the video, the photos looked different than what people were describing. But then once you saw the video of it, you go, wow, that's really compelling. It looked like something out of the War of the Worlds, like a searchlight stabbing out from the sky.
You know what? It's interesting. Weirdly, I think we're looping back. I guess to answer my own question, I think we're looping back to that 19th century paradigm where an eyewitness account does matter insofar as does it come from a trusted source. Like, let's say there's a UFO sighting or whatever. It's different. If you just see a photo, we're so inured to the, photoshops of UFOs. But if we see, for example, let's say, Greg Grunberg is a popular celebrity person. And if he says, guys, I am looking you right in the eye. I'm telling you, this is not a viral campaign. I am staking my online reputation on the fact that what you're seeing is exactly the way I saw it. I think that would have a tremendous amount of credibility and a tremendous amount of clout.
Like Russell Crowe's UFO video?
Oh, no, I didn't see this. What's his UFO video?
Russell Crowe 2-3 years ago said that he found that he had video. He was shooting out a window, thought he was seeing, like, lights in the sky or whatever. And it was just, it's a reflective phenomena. It was like car headlights reflecting off at an odd angle off of something. But he's like, hey, this is the real thing. We're seeing this thing here.
Well, but it wasn't a fraud. He was just mistaken. It is all right.
He was mistaken. Yeah, he was sincere. He was absolutely sincere.
Wow, you can really tell that is definitely just a car passing by. When with the burden of knowledge, the curse of knowing changes things a lot.
Yeah, so I agree that I think that the credibility of a person inherent what's their inherent credibility is certainly what was is influential to that. One of the problems we have though in one of the ways in which people sort of fail to think critically is I'll have somebody will say, "Oh my gosh, you see this thing that's on CNN." And they'll send me some email that says CNN reported this, blah blah blah, and it's not. It's a
It's
email
not
that says,
CNN.
yeah. And I would get in discussions with people like about the Bible. They'd say, "Well, there were hundreds of witnesses when he came back." Like, no, somebody wrote and said somebody wrote down that there were hundreds of witnesses. That's different than having 100 witness testimonials. Not to say that's not true or not.
Right.
That's where I fall on that. But people have this. A credible person told me this many credible people had that, and we get into these stupid internet memes that get thrown around like, oh, well, this great thing said by such and such person we all respect that's maybe borderline racist or whatever. That no, they didn't say that. You know, that never happened. Somebody just took this quote and put somebody else's name on it, and we just pass it on because our credibility filters get, you know, we see a keyword that, oh, I trust this, so it's okay. But that's not the source. That's not the source it came from.
Yeah, it's interesting. You could kind of mentally astroturf your way into credibility if as even if you know like I guess that CNN reports is the perfect phrase because you're not going to check to see if CNN actually reported it, but you do know that if they did, there's a heuristic that means it's very likely that there's some kind of credibility behind it.
Yeah, some responsible adults at somewhere had to sign off on this or not, which was, you know, one of the problems, like the CNN, you know, iNews witness reported or whatever it was. It
Oh
was
yeah, by
could,
the way, that whole iNews, which again I understand CNN's desire to help to what they want is the fastness of first reporter on the ground, Twitter level reaction, but they want to maintain their credibility with the CNN brand, and unfortunately, I think the iReport thing really just did them harm and didn't really bring them much more rapid response. They didn't get a better reputation for being fast on the draw for that kind of news.
yeah, there have been a number of instances where people have tried to try like wiki news and whatnot, and what happens is that the people who have the most reasoning or most effort to try to convince you of something, which are people who are arguing for a particular point of view, are the ones who are going to be the first ones to use that and abuse that and not give you full facts, not give you the full side of it. They're going to present it. They're going to use it as a platform for advocacy because they're like, it's like my Facebook feed. You know, my friends who put politics stuff on Facebook, stop, don't do that. Don't subject other people, don't subject your friends to your politics on Facebook because one, they probably have their own informed opinions. Two, it's not polite, you know. And three, you're becoming a shill for something that maybe you're not that informed about.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. There's a reason I post stuff on Facebook and virtually never read anything on there. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that becomes into this sort of, well, here's an opportunity for me to communicate to people. Like, well, yeah, you can, but that's yeah, it's not why maybe your friends wanted to talk to you there or whatever. And the same with these eyewitness, these sort of wiki journalism, these citizens journalism things. A lot of the people who are running to go do it are people with an agenda. Their agenda isn't the news. The agenda is truth as they see it. Now they can't tell the difference because in their world everybody knows this is a fact, but you know, that's not the case. Now, I don't mean to single out wiki news in particular. I mean kind of in general, the wiki sort of approach to like crowdsource stuff because, you know, who's going to volunteer to do this is going to be somebody who's very passionate about something.
Well, and it's funny because I would imagine that part of the reason Wiki News is called that is partly to leverage the credibility of Wikipedia. Wikipedia, yes, anyone can edit it, yet anyone can change it. But over the years, it's built up this really good reputation. What's the story that it in a face-to-face test, it did about as well as the Encyclopedia Britannica, but the difference was the second the inaccuracies were reported in Wikipedia, they were able to instantly correct them, whereas Encyclopedia Britannica was not.
But the problem with Wikipedia, though, is that you have certain areas they've had administrators that control certain topics that you cannot get other points of view in there, and there are numerous examples of, you know, there are certain people you will never see appear on there because they pissed off somebody who handles that topic at some point. You know, and that's the scary part of Wikipedia, is that it's not as transparent as we sort of think in many respects, and in fact that there is you know, you're it's only as good as the mods handling. On some subjects the mods are fantastic, on some other ones who've been there for 15, 20 years, or at least as long as it's been around, are extremely territorial and vindictive. And I know people who are like, wow, you don't, like, you've done this, and you don't have this sort of, you don't have a Wikipedia page. Like, nope, it keeps getting taken down because this guy who's the mod got into a online argument with me back in such and such and won't allow it out.
Wow. That's disappointing to find out. That's really interesting.
It's the way the cookie crumbles. There's the advantage, the disadvantage. You know, the advantage of Wikipedia is you get all these volunteers committing to it. The disadvantage is a sense of entitlement, where they will sometimes, again, it's a small fraction. By and large, like, Wikipedia is my favorite resource. I go there all the time, particularly on certain kinds of concepts, because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get the most intelligent. They have, like, some of their science stuff, they have wonderfully intelligent moderators handle these things, and I trust that. I trust that more than conventional science reporting. Because you have somebody who's a science reporter for some of these places, they know more than anybody else in the newsroom about science, but they don't know enough. And if any corrections or things that they get wrong, they're never going to hear from their editor, because the editor doesn't know any difference.
Right. Well, and also it's like there's very little reason for any science writer on even a, we'll say Scientific American or any journal. There's very little reason for them to call out facts and figures that dispute their own thesis or their own position of the article. Whereas because Wikipedia is written by consensus of warring parties, it forces a more in-depth, kind of consensus or more nuanced evaluation of it.
Or there's going to be a talkback section. There's going to be people pointing this out, and somebody has to go there and look and see and say, oh, why isn't this in here? And,
right. Hey, man, so some folks are wondering what happened to Justin Young. We mentioned he wasn't feeling too hot to begin with. He bolted. But in the meantime, do you want to, Andrew, go into picks? Do you have picks?
Let's go into picks. I need to think of my pick.
That's okay. I've got a great pick. I'm really, really excited about it. We have talked before about, in the 1960s, there was a book called The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. And he projected famine around the corner. He projected that per Malthusian economics, there's only so much food in the world. And he went on The Tonight Show 20 plus times. He was a funny, very likable, charismatic, entertaining character, even though he was a lot like Carl Sagan. Even though he was projecting a kind of a horrifying message of doom and gloom, he did so in a way that was exciting and relatable to the masses. And as a result, a lot of his philosophies and his organizations have created a lot of policies that still affect, environmental science to this very
created
day.
Human misery. Let's just put it flat out.
It's whatever. It's fine. But on the flip side, we've talked about the economist Julian Simon, who was not as well liked, who was not as popular, who was in a quiet university, and I want to say Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and was fuming, raging at the proclamations. He says, humans are not butterflies. Yes, if you overpopulate with butterflies, you have a population collapse. But humans, you get 100 humans in the room, you figure out ways to create more. And he made the counterintuitive claim that essentially human intelligence would guarantee that we never run out of anything. Like, as we start to run out of something, we will find substitutions. We'll find better technologies to get more of it. We'll figure out ways to not need it. But and to some degree, he's 100% right. We've never run out of a non-renewable resource. Or at least that's the quote I read somewhere. Don't hold me to it. But here's the interesting part. He did not have the leverage or the platform. So in order to reach out and to say something that would get the attention of Ehrlich, he said, hey, man, you want to bet? He said, if you're so sure that everything's going to run out, what say we make a bet on 10 commodities? And I think he said you could choose oil if you wanted, but it was like tungsten, tin, nickel, and a bunch of other stuff. And let's take the 10-year totals. And if you're right and everything's running out, all of these should be much more expensive in 10 years. Why don't we make a bet and see who wins? And he won the bet, but that bet is the stuff of legends, and that is my pick. The book is called The Bet. It's available on Audible right now. It's like a 7-hour audiobook. And the purpose of the book is to humanize all of the players in the bet, to tell the background before it, and it does a really good job of making an argument for why as satisfying as it is to have these polar opposite viewpoints and to have one side stick it in the face of another. The author's position is that maybe that's not the best way to run environmental policy, like a sports game. And it was fascinating to read because I was largely familiar with the Julian Simon side of things, but it did a good job of portraying both men as very flawed and very human individuals. He portrays Julian Simon as somebody who battled depression most of his life, who didn't really get the validation that he thought he deserved, and was very swept up in all of a sudden, the conservatives in the early 1980s in the Reagan era, all of a sudden they had a champion and somebody whose work they could point to validate their growth supply side economics theories. It was really interesting because I was left a little bit more bummed out about both Ehrlich and Simon by the time it ended. I didn't expect that. I liked Simon a little bit less. I liked Ehrlich a lot less. Like every cartoon stereotype of the wealthy, jet-setting, like he talks about times he's in Aspen, Colorado, sipping wine on the top of a mountaintop in a ski lodge with his friends, talking about the need to eliminate 1 billion people from the planet and what kind of policies they can enact and how they can hold back foreign aid and insist it be tied together with population control measures and birth control and so on. I don't know. It was really a fascinating read. If you like that whole story, it's definitely worth reading. That's my pick. The Bet by Paul Sabin. Sabin.
There's also I'm guessing there's also a Planet Money episode about this.
Well, they have the author on there, and he briefly talks about it, and that's what put it on my radar. But definitely worth reading the entire book for.
Very cool.
What's interesting is that right now we have an amazing economic phenomenon taking place that's not getting nearly as much attention as it probably should in helping us understand the predictive or lack of predictive quality of certain sectors of the chattering classes about these things. Gas prices are as low, they're in some places, they're $1.25, $1.26 in parts of this country. Gas prices are ridiculously low. They're historic low. Gas prices, if you compare them, let's say the height of the gas price, we're at what you could buy a gallon of gas for like in 1980, in some parts of the country. Same now, of course, adjusted for inflation, whatever, ridiculously cheap. Almost nobody, when I say almost nobody, there was a contingent of economists who said, no, we think this is where things are going to go because peak oil, it was this concept that's been batted around for over 100 years that we're going to reach this point at which we're not going to have any more oil, but people who were geologists were saying, well, no, actually there's more, but yeah, it'll be too expensive to reach. And it's like this Malthusian thing. Well, but technology will progress. It won't progress that much. No, we think it will. And peak oil is not a term that you really hear talked about other than some of the most diehard people are saying, well, we're still going to reach it. Like, no, we're not. The amount of oil reserves we have is ridiculous. Our access to more oil is tremendous. And even if we reach the point of we use that, we've got these things, these, methane hydrates, which far exceed our amount of oil. But it's weird because it's just the number of people that we've been hearing talking about for years and years about peak oil are wrong, flat out wrong, absolutely absurdly wrong. Yet, they don't get called to the task on that.
Sure. Well, and by the way, Strengths in the chat says, well, Easter Island ran out of trees. That's my whole point, is we run out of renewable resources all the time. Because we treat them like, they'll come back, there'll be more trees, and then we just chop them all down, and then we have none. It's the non-renewable resources that counterintuitively the prices start to reflect the actual scarcity of them, and as a result, we don't seem to run out of them. And again, don't quote me. I don't know nothing. I'm just quoting other people.
Easter Island ran out of trees because they dedicated their economy to a ridiculous religious belief that they needed to keep erecting these monuments and tearing down their trees to move them across there. They decided they were going to embrace some ridiculous form of inefficiency because they thought this would please the gods. And I would say that there's an argument to be made that a lot of our I am very much for a reducing our use of carbon, reducing a number of our pollutants, reducing all these sorts of things. But there is this sort of idea that, like, yeah, but if we make this sacrifice, which one won't make a difference until the later part of the century, it will not make a difference as far as reducing these things in any measurable thing. It will dramatically impede our economy and send us down the path of Easter Island, where we progressively become poorer and poorer and poorer. So. Yeah, they did. You compare Haiti to the Dominican Republic. They share the island, and Dominicans had some bad governance of late, but up until a reasonable time, it was a stark difference economy-wise because in Haiti, they had no real property rights. They could tear down all the trees without penalty because nobody owned the trees, so they had no trees. They had erosion, and one of the many things that just devastated that economy of an amazing group of people that when they immigrate to other places like the United States become extremely successful, which shows you that it's bad management, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, man? What do you got to recommend?
Oh, let me just put out something else just to think about with oil. With the reduction in oil prices, by the way, that means that $2 trillion in the last 3 or 4 years that we did not spend on oil got to go to other parts of the economy. Think about that. $2 trillion that would have gone to oil companies, et cetera, because of the reduced costs, got to be spent on other factors. And that's an amazing thing to think about. Every time oil prices get low, it means you get to use that money somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm gonna, my pick, man. I've picked this before, and I'm gonna pick it again because every time I sit down and watch it, I absolutely adore it and I love it. Actually, I'm gonna do 2 picks. One is just Galaxy Quest is on Netflix. We lost Alan Rickman.
So good.
It's a perfect little movie. It really, really is. It's so good. I highly recommend you just go watch Galaxy Quest again. And what's his face? The lead Thermian. You'll recognize him from Deadpool, by the way.
That's right.
Rainn Wilson's in it briefly. You just go look at all the other cameos in there. But one, check that out. And then I watched a few and I enjoyed it. And then I got back into watching a few. And sometimes I start off watching an episode and maybe I get a little bit bored and I have to come back into it. And then I enjoy it thoroughly. I'm talking about Black Mirror.
Oh my gosh. So good. So good.
I haven't finished all of the way into it, but I'm, just started the one where some sort of weird future thing where some girl's being hunted by people with guns and stuff, which, like the Prime Minister one, like the pig thing was one like, meh. And then the one about the reality competition show Hot Shot I thought was fantastic. The Domhnall Gleeson one I thought was great. And I think that so many of them are really, really, really good. So that's my other pick. And then, check out my book, Station Breaker, please.
Heck yeah, dude. Station Breaker. And of course, the news behind the scenes is Black Mirror is picked up for a number of episodes with Netflix, and they've already started to announce some of the stars that are going to be on there. It's really going to be a powerhouse brand very shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, it's been weird.
Yeah, it has.
Hey,
Weirder than usual, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, Justin took real sick. So hopefully he's all right, and we'll hear about that shortly.
Yes.
Yeah,
I noticed in the chat there was a lot of discussion about oil as far as the factors and prices and stuff. I mean, it is certainly in some factors where you have where they haven't been doing as much development. It comes to control of, more how do we, particularly OPEC we'll turn the spigot on or off. But in the case of fracking and sideways drilling, the amount is just the number of proven reserves has improved dramatically. And that's why OPEC is trying to shut them down. They're trying to lower the price of oil to the point that all these fracking enterprises go out of business. And there's been a lot of, number of companies have gone out of business because when those oil prices fell, they couldn't compete. But the tech exists, the reserves are there, and when oil creeps back up again.
Right. Well, and that's the question, is whether or not that's going to happen. There's a really interesting, doggone it, I think it might be another Planet Money, where they're talking about like what happens in a world where, like, Saudi Arabia has enjoyed no taxes and essentially free gas forever and ever. And then now all of a sudden they're like, yeah, kind of have to have taxes. Kind of have to pay for all this stuff.
Yeah, that's going to be scary. Brian, how are you on time?
I should probably finish setting up for the show. I don't think I can do after things this week.
Okay.
If you want to.
Yeah, I'll do. It's a weird tank. I'll just do. I'll do it.
A quickie solo weird tank.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll use hit the restroom first, and then I'll come back and do that.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. Hey man, sorry for the shortened episode this go round. I was gonna lean on Justin, but then Justin had to bow out as well.
Yeah,
so.
I hope he's doing all right.
Yeah, so it's the Andrew show right now.
Well,
all right, I'll be right back.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi guys. So as we are between things, our music tonight is FKA Twigs. It's great. It's funny. I found a couple of new albums that I really liked the other day. And when I find new stuff, I like to go to the YouTube. YouTube actually has a webpage where you can type in artists and music and stuff and see if it'll actually get taken down, which is really funny. And of the 3 albums that I found last night, the one that I liked the most, which is not from FKA, is a worldwide block, which is such a shame because it's also great. So I love FKA Twigs. It's great. By the way, Problem Solvers is coming up on Night Attack this Tuesday, so check out the Twitter for the link if you've got a problem for Problem Solvers.
I like between things. Bryce things. Bryce, you're gonna co-host this with me. Is that cool with you?
Sure. Let me set up a thing.
All right.
What's that look like? Yeah, hey, there we go. Alrighty. Take it away in 3, 2.
Welcome to After Things, where we talk about being a creative, doing creative things, making a living at that, and trying to do that. I'm Andrew Main. Joining me is Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Brian has to go do a show, and Justin is
sick. He got a little sick.
Yeah, we hope he's feeling better. Yes, he was in the middle of the show and got sick. So
yeah. Best wishes to.
Yes. Sorry, it's it's one of those things that your buddy. You're like, man. Well, we'll have an update on that. I was cracking jokes about Zyka, and look what happens. It's not funny.
Yeah. Jeez, the Andrew Main curse.
Learned my lesson. So Bryce is sitting in. He's in the Chewbacca seat right now, and what we're going to talk about is we're going to do an episode of Weird Tank on After Things. So it's funny. I realized today that we called it Weird Tank, although it's on After Things.
It's on After Things. Well, because I think you guys talked about it on Weird Things, maybe, and then I don't know. Yeah.
So this is the way it works. If you have a business or some strategy or something that you're approaching and you want us to consider, I mean, to give you our input on it. And again, we'll be the first ones to tell you we're not experts. Just take us as just some other person weighing in with a point of view on that and nothing more than that. We don't want to ruin any lives, but we will take credit when it helps out. So we've got a response here. This is from Andy Morris, and he says, "Howdy, guys. So I'm a science teacher and a wannabe sci-fi fantasy writer, which has led to my current dilemma. I've spent countless hours writing, mainly because I enjoy doing it. I've tried self-publishing a few things on Amazon, but I know without spending some money to get serious editing and professional cover art and just getting better at writing, the chances of anything making money are pretty slim. On the other hand, last year I started posting learning materials I've created for use in my science classes to a popular website where teachers can buy other teachers' materials. It's called teacherspayteachers.com. If you don't mind the buzz marketing, happy to promote that. Last semester alone, my products, about 20 items, made me over $1,000, and pretty much every product has a 5-star review, which is 2 or 3 stars higher than my stuff on Amazon. As a father of 3, full-time teacher, and part-time bouncy house delivery man, I have a limited amount of time to devote to my creative endeavors, mainly when everyone else in the house is sleeping. One choice is to spend it writing, because I like doing it, with the side chance that maybe someday I'll actually make something worth selling. Or should I spend the time cracking out learning materials to post to the teacher site instead? My learning materials are objectively better than my writings and actually make me real money, but I haven't really spent much time creating anything new to post. Should I focus on what I'm good at and can make money doing, or do what I'm passionate about, even if it will probably never lead to much? I know I can do both and find some happy medium, but if you had to choose, which direction would you lean? Thanks for any advice."
Man, that's like the time-tested question, right? Do you do what you love, or do you do what you think works?
Absolutely. And first off, Andy, I got to tell you this. You are very, very lucky that you have found some creative medium that has traction. Traction's the term I use to apply when something finds an audience, when something makes you money, when something you create has some effect on reality around you. And the fact that your teaching materials are doing this is wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. I think that's great. I think that by all means, you should pursue that. I would say a comparison for me would be when I wrote books on magic and how to do magic. And I spent a number of years, I went from performing to wanting to have more time to pursue other projects. So I started writing these how-to books, creating magic tricks and doing that. And that became a pretty lucrative business for me, enough that I was able to support myself doing that. But I knew there was a limit to how often I'd be able to put these books out and how many of them I wanted to do. I just put out a new magic book a few months ago, Magic and Mischief, but I've only put out one in the last few years. It's still something I like to create. I'll probably be creating more magic books in the future, but I like to write fiction more than that. I also like to do my new how-to books, like my book, How to Write a Novella in 24 Hours is fun. I'm doing one on writer's block. I would say that it comes down to there are 2 factors in place. If you need the money and you have this thing that makes money, do that first. That should be your primary goal, particularly as a father who's got kids and you need to do that. If it's just, hey, it's more of a fun money kind of thing and you do it because of that, then write some teaching stuff, write some fiction. I'm going to take a look at let's see if I find you up on Amazon to see if you're under that name. And I'm going to give you some advice though. As far as getting your fiction edited and all that, there are different ways to go about doing these things. It's certainly, you don't have to spend anything if you want to do something. What you have to do is spend time. So I see a few books here. I presume they might be by Andy Morris. They don't even have covers.
Yeah.
It is extremely easy to get covers done for a book. You don't have to spend anything really to get that. If you go to, let's say, let's try canva.com or Canva. What's the web? Yeah, canva.com is an easy way to start designing book covers. You can go sign in for there and you can create covers in really, really quickly. You can use just pre-existing album art or pre-existing artwork, drop your own text over that. Covers, if you put a little bit of time into it, aren't that difficult. If you check out my book, How to Write a Novella in 24 Hours, it's only 99 cents. Just email me if you want. I'll just send you a copy. I'm not really trying to make money off you from that. I go into, how to create quick and dirty cheap covers. I created, 5 covers in there that I think would be good enough to be in a bookstore very easily using a simple formula. So that's not hard. Editing is hard. Editing takes time and it takes patience. I just did a massive edit of Station Breaker where I had hundreds of people on my email list send me in their corrections, and I was always going to find, different, I'm going to continuously find new things that need to be fixed, which is the same when I pick up a Stephen King book and I'll find grammatical mistakes and these sort of errors. That'll happen in any release. But my point is, you can either have a dedicated person you pay to do this, you can have a bunch of people do this, and if you don't have that access to a network, then you do it. You take your time with it. I have a printer next to me that I print my books out on when I want to go line by line and check my own spelling, my own mistakes. That's the way I do it. I have to change the medium that I wrote it so that my face, that my brain is in a different place than where my face was looking at. So you can get it edited. You can get a cover design. You don't have to spend money to do it. It just takes time. So let's say that's out of the question now. Comes down to, doesn't matter money. But it doesn't mean they're going to be good books. And you feel like you're writing better books in that space than you're creating your teacher materials. At least that's what it sounds like. There's an expression called a million words, which means that as a writer, maybe you should have a million words under your belt before you start to publish. And we had JF on our show before who talked about all the books he wrote that he never released. In the age of, sorry, I was trying to combine three words at once there. In the age of digital publishing, it's very easy to take the first thing that comes out of your keyboard and put it online. That's a mistake. That's not a good idea because it's not going to be as good as the thing that happens after your millionth word, and that reaction to that first thing you put out there is going to affect your experience on everything else you do.
Well, especially compared to something that is a little less high profile, like with the chat room, we get a lot of people who are interested in podcasting because we're all centered around these different podcasts. And with that, my advice usually is just to do it because that's something that you're probably not going to charge people for. It's something that you like you need to have a lot of writing under your belt. You need to have a lot of airtime, a lot of mic time to get your public speaking, your on camera look, you need time to do it. And that's the thing where if you make a podcast for yourself or for nobody, then that I think helps less than something like putting out the first thing that you write.
Absolutely, Bryce. And that's the problem, is that we see the things that we see as an audience. We're coming into the middle of it. We're not seeing it to the starting stages, because at the starting stages there isn't an audience. Every time I sit down and I do a podcast with Brian and Justin, and then I listen to it, I can tell the difference between those guys who do 4 or 5 podcasts a week and myself who does 1.5 podcasts a week. I can tell the difference of, I got into podcasting the same time Justin did, roughly the same time as Brian did, but I never did more than 1 podcast a week, where those guys, they're 5 times ahead of me, 6 times ahead of me, and I can tell the difference from that. Sure. And I would say that for anybody wanting to get into that, whether it's writing or podcasting, you have to appreciate that there's that we've talked about this before. There's that gap between when you're aware of what's good and what's bad, and where your self-assessment ability is way off, where you don't really accurately assess your capabilities. Sometimes we go headfirst into that. We think this is good. We think it's great. We put it out in front of everybody, and all people point out are the flaws. And then we think, oh man, it sucks, I shouldn't do it. Well, no, it means you just got to work on the flaws. You got to work on that, making that better. Mm-hmm. And that's the hard part. The hard part is saying, oh, I don't get to start off at the same spot that the people I like or admire or aspire to be. I have to start at the point where they started at, which you never saw.
And so to bring it back to the writing on the opposite end, much like with the podcast where you mentioned, people will come in the middle of it and very rarely go all the way back and listen to all your mistakes and flubs. But with writing, it's a much lower clip than podcasting. So you're going to get more people who are like, oh, I really like this most recent book of yours. Let me go back. Oh, this old book is not so great. It's like it's a density problem, right? Like one bad book is going to last a lot. Is going to count for your library of work much larger for much longer than a podcast, which you could do more commonly. So being selective about what you put out is incredibly important on low volume releases like that.
Yeah, and you have too an advantage that comes into play when you first do something like a podcast. You're often just super energetic and excited. My first novel, Public Enemy Zero, if I were to try to write it today, I would write it very differently. And I don't know if that would make it better. What that book had was an excitement and an enthusiasm that is very obvious when you read the book that makes up for a lot of the early writer mistakes that I made. And not to say that I don't make entirely new mistakes now, but that's one of the things. Enthusiasm can carry through a lot, and that's often what happens with sometimes you'll have writers who come out with amazing freshman efforts because it's a thing they've been thinking about for 10 years. They put it out there and they may have learned some technical craft, but they become better storytellers, but they don't have better stories to tell. That happens in music. We talk, the sophomore slump is a real thing where you're like, now I'm going to go do this next thing. And I didn't think about it as much as I did the other thing. And it's not going to be as good.
Yeah. Especially in sort of the more traditional avenues like music or books where you've spent 10 years coming up with your initial idea, and then you get a contract, and then you suddenly have to have another album in 12 months.
And whereas in podcasting, often you can be so excited about something that becomes infectious and carries through, and that's part of perhaps the content. But yeah, it's when you sit around all day listening to podcasts, you tend to start thinking like, maybe I need to do a podcast. But the problem you have in podcasting is the same you have in publishing. And the thing to think about is that every year there are 2 million more books published digitally.
Wow.
Used to be 10, 15 years ago in the publishing market, you had the traditional publishers were putting out 200,000 books a year. 200,000 books a year was arguably too many books. No, it was impossible for one single human being to read that many books. And nor would they be expected to, but that was just a ridiculous amount of books. Now you have 2 million digital titles put out a year. What that means, and this is one of the things that kind of got overlooked in the talk about the idea of the long tail, which Chris Anderson wrote a very interesting book that made some very cogent points on it, but I think was off quite a bit, was the idea that, well, you create these things and then you have a long tail where you can sell for years and years and years. Yeah, that's true, but when you're in an environment where every year there's 2 million more things coming out to compete with it, that long tail is very, very skinny. And I have books that, Public Enemy Zero was a very big seller for me. It was a very, very big book, but there's the long tail on that is minuscule. It's minuscule. I move a couple copies a month, but I'm not actively promoting it, and it doesn't. In an environment where every month there are thousands of thrillers and techno thrillers being put out there, no matter how good it is, it's still going to get lost in all that noise because it's just layers and layers and layers of ice pack keep growing on top of it. And that's the thing you have to consider is that it's shorter windows. There's all that other stuff competing out against there. And my business advice to Andy is you have a lot of traction with these
The teaching
writing
materials.
What's that?
The teaching materials that he's
Absolutely.
putting together,
That you're going to probably have your efforts there will be much more rewarded probably than in ebooks. I don't know what the ceiling is though. The reason I went from writing magic books to sci-fi to then writing techno or writing thrillers for general audiences is I looked at what the size of the audience was. I said, how can I appeal to as many people as possible? And I went from sci-fi books that sold 10,000 copies to thrillers that sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And I'm like, I get that. So, but that's not a problem to really worry about, to be honest with you, is that there are sci-fi writers who are doing fantastically well by writing really broadly and deeply in their genre. George R.R. Martin only writes these I mean, he was written a lot of different kinds of books, but when he settled into writing fantasy, he wrote the fantasy book. We've talked about Andy Weir. Andy Weir wrote one sci-fi book, The Martian, and it's done pretty damn well for him.
Yeah. And it kind of is like a Glengarry Glen Ross thing. Like you got something that is working for you. I think at least for right now, it behooves you to see what happens if you invest more time into that and see if you continue getting a return on that. Maybe a little more time will push it up exponentially. Maybe you just won't it'll be diminishing returns. But of the two options you have right now, you're going to have to weigh if the money coming in from the teaching materials is worth your time, and if your time can be more devoted to that. Otherwise, you can say maybe it's not worth the money, and I'd rather hone my writing craft. That's kind of the balance that he's going to have to find on his own.
Absolutely, but I think that you can also say to yourself, what do I enjoy about writing that I can put into this other thing? And that often can make it worthwhile.
Mm.
And there's no reason to say that you can't say, hey, for a couple hours every Sunday, you're going to work on your sci-fi book. But the universe has spoken to you and told you, hey, this thing seems to be really well. It's going to be a lot more easy for you to compete there than it is going to be competing in the book space, where it's not so much a matter of money as much as time and energy and all that. I am with Station Breaker launching, and I'm emailing podcasts and places saying, "Hey, have me on as a guest. I'd love to be a guest," because I've got to go spend a ton of time pushing that book out.
Yeah.
But it should be worth it. So,
Yeah.
Was that our question for the day there? Or
yeah, that I believe is the one that I've gotten
Okay.
since then. Yeah.
Sweet. So if any of you want us to try to approach or talk about what you're working on, send it to
me. Just go to neshcom at gmail, neshcom at gmail.com.
All right. Do you have any picks? Have any recommendations? Or?
I do. I was talking about this before the show, but I will keep it spoiler free because it's still pretty recent. I like puzzle games, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have kind of a weird sort of taste in video games. I like puzzle games. I like music games, sort of not alternative, not necessarily indie, but it's I won't try to describe it, but there's a new game that came out about a month or so ago called The Witness. This is from Jonathan Blow. He made Braid, which came out a few years ago, which is a time travel game. This is I think The Witness is the height of puzzle execution in a video game. You have it starts off simple, where you have these panels where you are solving line puzzles, and as you go through the game, you learn more and more logic rules about what different elements of the puzzles affect how you're supposed to solve them, and it does it completely non-verbally, not with no communication, and the thrill that you get from realizing I just learned something and I was able to apply it, and the relief of of breaking through whatever that logical hurdle is incredibly thrilling. Like I playing this had me like literally screaming in some cases because of how ingenious it is at not just getting you to learn things, but also managing your expectations of like, you're solving these puzzles and then you might see a thing, which I won't spoil, but you might see a thing, and then you realize, oh my God, the scale of what I thought this game was has doubled, has tripled, because of these new discoveries. I think it's fantastic, and I just finished like the second one of the toughest parts of the game, and the messages that it conveys about learning and logic and also just meditation and sort of mindfulness even, I think are also just really nice, and I think it's great if you like puzzle games. I've been telling, when people ask about it, I say, do you like puzzle games? And if they say no, I say, you don't want to play it.
Yeah, this looks utterly beautiful. I was a kid who spent so much time in the world of Myst because that was such a, all-inclusive sort of universe that was, I mean, man, talk about something just like pushing the upper limits of what the technology could do at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm looking this up right now.
And what I think in that vein is that The Witness is a really gorgeous game, and it's able to hide intricate details within graphical elements that in the past would have just been like procedurally generated or random. And so it actually is able to use a really high fidelity of visuals to inform how you solve some of the puzzles. I think it's really great, and I know it's a $40 puzzle game, but it's also the most fun I've had in a very long time.
What platform are you playing it on?
I'm playing it on PC. It is also on the PS4.
Interesting. The HTC Vive, they've announced that that's going to go on sale in April, I believe.
Yeah, for like $800.
Yeah,
But
eight
you
hundred
also
bucks,
get the
and
controllers and the laser tower thing, right?
yeah, so it'll come with the headset, the controllers. It'll come with the sensors that tell you spatially where you are in a room. And
Mhm.
I gotta tell you, man, I have one of the Oculus Dev models,
Mhm.
but playing with the Vive, because the difference with an Oculus is that an Oculus is great for standing and sitting in front of your PC with the sensor telling you where your head is pointing. It's the difference between having your head fixed on a stick
Mhm.
and really moving around with the HTC Vive. And uh, you know, I'm going to have a lot of trouble resisting buying that with a PC gaming package, because the experience I had with it was just insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Uh,
And did you pre-order an Oculus? What do you have what's your first like sort of what do you think is going to be your first step uh, purchase wise into the space?
I mean, I've had an Oculus for over a year.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I've had a dev model. I played with it, plug it into the game engines and stuff, and doing stuff like that. But
Mhm.
uh, my frustration from Oculus one, in the middle of working on it, they stopped doing Mac support, which told me it's going to be totally a gaming device.
Right.
And then the control, like they had no answer for controllers. Like, oh, we're gonna have third party, and obviously because they're selling the Oculus without controllers, and they're going to ship later on. And I thought that, like, man, yeah, what would it be like to be, if I wanted a better way to play Call of Duty, if I wanted to be a better way to be inside of a game,
Yeah.
and look around, Oculus sounds cool. But if I want that really different virtual experience where I really feel like I'm in the holodeck,
Mhm.
when I did the Vive, that was it. Because
Yeah.
it's just, it's hard to explain the difference, but it's one is seeing the world from having your head in a fixed position and rotating around and looking at it. The other one is walking around a space,
Mhm.
and you move, not telling a little controller to move you forward, not telling, like, you're not using a joystick to move you, but just walking and having the sensors on the wall know where you are. If you get too close to a wall, a grid appears in front of you and tells you to back up.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely insane. I mean, I didn't feel like I was in a game. I felt like I was in another dimension.
And I think it's good that there's that dichotomy of what each device is aiming at, because definitely gaming is going to be a huge element of VR. And when you have something like Oculus, which I guess, are they going to make controllers for the Oculus, or are they just
Yeah,
going to
they're
stick with
going to
third
have
party?
controllers for it, but they just,
Um,
they're
but basing it, letting the
a Rift.
consumers use, the Xbox controller, which is one of the biggest ones for PC gaming, having that compatibility built in is definitely a big gaming thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you can get this thing and it works with all the stuff that you have, but also knowing that the Vive is going to have its own controllers, which are meant for a certain type of interactivity. It's great that both of those spaces are being filled between these two products.
Yeah, man, I don't know what an Oculus does that a Vive can't.
Mhm.
And a Vive is more. It's more expensive. But my gosh, that free roaming capability, kids. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's one. The difference was Oculus for me was sitting on the edge of a pool, leaning over the edge of the pool and sticking your head underwater and like, I'm in the water. Vive was just jumping right in and
Hmm.
walking around. So,
Yeah.
but what an exciting point we live in. So, and now we've got Google's announced that they're going to take cardboard and make a full all-in piece of hardware that you don't have to plug your phone in. That will be a standalone piece of hardware using their own room mapping technology.
Huh.
Um, yeah, I would like
Interesting.
to be honest with you. Like, I if we all we had was Oculus, I wouldn't get it. I mean, I'd get
Really?
Vive because of the experience.
Oh.
Yeah, because like it's just the next gen stuff with free roaming is so much better.
Yeah.
So much more. It's not a matter of, oh, the resolution's better. It's a difference between you having to sit in your chair and pretend you're there, or standing up and walking around
Mm.
in that version, the snow crash reality.
And I think I've been kind of cold on virtual reality, but also I haven't had a great chance to play with any of them for a really significant amount of time. But
Mhm.
I think part of it is because of sort of the Oculus thing, where that's kind of an iterative addition where
Just
the
a bigger
vibe is
monitor.
a bigger jump. Right. I think that would be something great to see to try out as the next step in this platform.
Yeah. It's exciting. My pick is HBO's show Vinyl. Have you seen this?
No, I've been seeing a lot of the promos for it. You like it? Well, I mean,
I
you're picking it.
do. The premiere episode, it was funny because I forgot everything I knew about it going into it. In the premiere episode, it's set in 1973. It's set within the music industry, and I thought it was good. Parts of it were a little bit like, this feels a little bit laggy or whatever, but ultimately I very much enjoyed it. And then I realized, oh, Martin Scorsese directed this. It's set in the world of music in 1973 with this music company, the American Century Music. It stars, I think, Bobby Cannavale, who has been the Boardwalk Empire, played, I think, great roles in there. He is the head of the music company, and it's very much what is the music industry like at that point. And this is a series that is Martin Scorsese, Mick Jagger, contributing stories to it. So what's cool about this is, like, I loved Almost Famous, but Almost Famous had to be very careful and sort of dance around who these stories were about, because if they name names, it could be problematic. Where here they have permission, they're doing it full on. So in the opening, one of the things in the pilot episode is this music company is trying to sign Led Zeppelin. So they're backstage at Led Zeppelin, and there's a young Robert Plant there who's acting very Robert Plant like, and there's the manager of Led Zeppelin who's a notorious loud man, and they're there. And part of a reoccurring point of this is this the lead character going to a concert by the New York Dolls, which the event that happens is fictitious, but the New York Dolls were a very real influential band in the music scene in the early 1970s. And so it's so cool that they're using real bands. So you're getting a taste of what music was like at that time. The stories are not all accurate, but it's still based in reality.
Is the main character supposed to also be a real person? Is this supposed to be semi nonfiction? Where
I don't know. My knowledge of that era of music, of who some of the characters are. I know about who Ahmed is and some of the other players in it, but I don't know. The short answer is that it would not surprise me if he was based on a real person, but we can find that out. We have the power to do that.
Because it's almost because it reminds me a little bit of sort of the premise of like the Newsroom, where it was like real events, but it was fake people reporting on the news as if it were happening to them at the same time, and they existed, but they don't. And the problem with that was that it got extremely preachy of just like, nah, we are going to report on the Gulf oil spill immediately, better than everyone, and we're going to give it focus and no one else does. Like that was a real issue that the Newsroom had. But if this is
no, it's not a real guy. I didn't. That show is not for me. But that most of the main characters are composites, are just totally new creations. Which, because part of what happens here is somebody would get very litigious because of some of the things that take place. But most of the bands though are, you can tell like, oh, I don't think this is a real band because, they're going to be a main part of it, but they can show up backstage at Led Zeppelin and have something happen that's probably not going to piss them off. But the closest example they talk about is the founder of Atlantic Records, Ahmet Erdogan, but he's mentioned in there, but he's clearly not him. But he probably might be somewhat similar, although Mick Jagger says no.
Interesting. Very cool. So that's HBO, right?
Yeah, HBO. Yeah.
One episode out already. Two
is on tomorrow, I believe.
Okay, very cool. Yep. Tonight. Wait, is it a Sunday show?
Tonight. Sorry. Tonight, yeah. Sorry. I was doing a time travel experiment earlier, and I forgot I jumped into Sunday. So
right.
I got to go back to Saturday in a few minutes, though. It's been after.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It was a good episode.
Yeah.
Let me see this.
You need those other guys.
Right. Let's save this. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about vinyl, so I think I'll give it a try tonight.
Yeah, they went ahead and renewed it.
Oh, already? Good.
Yeah, which it didn't have like the best ratings, but
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the show. The show's
yeah.
and I think we're going to call it, but have a good one. See you tomorrow for Cord Killers.